Welcome back.
Hello.
Welcome to week 70 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara. We have watched Monday, November 25th, 1985's episode 338. And in the world, in November of 1985, in the world of music, top hits include Aha's Take On Me, Whitney Houston's Saving All My Love For You, Stevie Wonder's Part-Time Lover, Jan Hammer's Miami Vice theme, Starships, We Built This City. In the episode, Amy leaves a series of instructions for Brick on how to do housework and goes off to work at Buzz's. During the day, we see Brick and Johnny spend the day doing various chores like ironing and cooking and dusting all at the same time. He tells Johnny he used to be a juggler, so he can do many things at once. And when Amy gets home, she is shocked by how much he's achieved in one day.
And you know, this whole scene made me wonder when Mr. Mom came out. Or
1983, I checked.
There you go. We were thinking the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Julia tells Lionel and Augusta that the DA has frozen Brick's assets. Julia tells Brick, and then Brick tells Amy. So they are, I guess they're going to be living on Amy's paycheck from Buzz's for a while, as long as she's got a separate account for that money. So things might go a little worse for them if they drag out this trial date, and if Brick can't exonerate himself somehow.
Yeah, and I think we're really seeing throughout this episode, and I know you'll probably talk about this later, but this is a point Julia brings up about how Brick's life has really been ruined by this whole allegation, and we're really seeing the repercussions of that. And I think the longer this goes on and the more evident it is that, you know, not only has this destroyed Brick's opportunities, but also is really influencing other people's lives, especially Amy's and Johnny's, then I think when Augusta's eventually found out, it's just going to be even heavier and heavier on her.
Mm-hmm. Julia made some insinuations against Augusta, just during their conversation. Augusta and Lionel talk about things that are boring to Brandon, so he leaves and wanders over to the Capwells and has breakfast with Sophia. When they realize Brandon's gone, Lionel goes to look for him, but he ends up going to the kitchen first to check on Rosa, and so Augusta has an opportunity to talk to Sophia first. And of course she tells him to stay away from Lionel, tells her to stay away from Lionel, and maybe get a pet. She suggests a number of them, including a snake. When Lionel does show up, Sophia urges him to take Brandon home quickly because she doesn't want another encounter with Augusta.
Yeah.
Then Sophia is contemplating the photos of her children and books a flight to Rome. So maybe she thinks Armonte Industries needs someone to see how things are going.
Yeah.
With Marcello in jail since, May? June, July, August, September, October.
We have to
6 months?
hope they have a competent board of directors or someone else actually running the company.
That they haven't run the company into the ground.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a whole thing where Marcello was trying to make some sort of a deal with Cece for Capwell and Armonte? I can't remember if that ever went through or what the state of that was. So that there may be this huge unfinished thing that the board is just waiting to hear about.
Yeah, and as we know, certainly the Capwell company or a series of companies is also in contentious leadership right now.
Mm-hmm. Maybe they'll take that opportunity to break the agreement, and then Sophia will actually have something to do running Armonte. Mark searches for his wife. He's going door to door on Lower State Street, looking in businesses that she might be working at, because apparently she has previously worked in restaurants and has taken a course in working in an office. He returns without success. Mother Isabel shows up at the Capwell house, and it's very early. We hear birds chirping. But Mason's all dressed and in a suit, and he takes the time to slag off Mary, saying if you have a notion of luring her back, you're in for quite a shock. And he makes a lot of insinuations that she's fallen from the high standards she may have had at the nunnery, but Mother Isabel sees through it and tells him to stop. Mm-hmm. And then when Mary does finally come home, he gets annoyed with her for finally showing up, and she says, I haven't had time off since, whatever date CC fell ill. So, for no reason other than to give Julia something to do in this episode and to have someone else fill some time at Buzz's between other conversations, Kirk has Julia look over a contract for him. Cruz is also at Buzz's, and he's imagining his scenarios. This time he imagines Kirk actually putting Eden's hand on the plug and pulling it. So he's getting bits and pieces of the truth just from his fantasies. Earlier in the day, Kirk realized that his shoes had been stolen, and we see his housekeeper for the first time as he quizzes her about whether she removed them for some reason. But it doesn't really dawn on him that there's an issue. We then see Pearl shining Kirk's shoes because he plans to wear them on a date, I think he said. Mm-hmm. So Cruz says, where did you get those shoes? And he says, I picked the key out of your pocket and got them from your bus station locker. So it was the shoes he stashed in there. I don't know. I had said it was the dress. Maybe it was both. Which means maybe if the dress was in there too, maybe Pearl knows about the dress now. He didn't mention it, so maybe it was just the shoes that he stashed in there, and he's got a different locker for the dress. So Cruz spends quite a while trying to get Pearl to take off those shoes, and then suddenly it's too late because Kirk arrives. So Pearl actually takes them off and shoves them under the table, and then Amy, much too loudly for both Cruz and Pearl, says, where are your shoes, Pearl? Buzz is going to be really, if the health inspector shows up here. But anyway, Kirk does not catch on that his shoes are under Cruz's desk. But Cruz comes over to tell him that they have evidence that he was at the Capwell house that night. And he says, what, Mary's testimony? And he says, no, we have a man's footprint. He goes, well, you can't match them to my shoes unless you broke into my place and stole my shoes. Well, that's not admissible in court. And Cruz says, who's to say that you didn't try to dispose of those shoes in an alley and that's where I found them? So Cruz has already thought through how he might bluff his way in court into getting those shoes admitted into evidence if he needs to. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I actually, before this, when Cruz and Pearl were still sort of debating the fact that Pearl's wearing these shoes, I think Pearl made a comment at one point and said something about, we'll have to put the shoes back. And Cruz said something like, are you stupid? We can't do that. And I'm thinking, are you stupid to have stolen them in the first place?
Cruz said, Kirk's probably noticed they're gone by now.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not on Team Cruz right now.
No, he's a bit addled, and Gina's not even drugging him.
Yeah, and he's actually being very shifty in this. I know he dislikes Kirk, but to plant evidence, come on.
Mm-hmm. I mean, no matter how clever he ends up being at the end in solving it, he's tainted so much of the evidence.
Yeah.
Kirk, very quickly, figures out that they must mean that the storm, had a certain time range, and that his footprint was in the mud. And he says, earlier in the day, Eden and I were at the Capwell house. We were never there in the evening, but during the day we were taking a walk, and we noticed a hose running, and I thought, well, it looks like it's about to rain. No point in leaving this hose running, and that's when I stepped into the mud to turn off that hose. So that was a really quick thing, and Cruz actually said it's a very believable thing that he's come up with to counter it. He says, but that'll all fall apart if Eden doesn't corroborate. And so he tells Pearl he's going to check with Eden. Next thing we see Kirk is in a payphone calling Eden, but she hasn't answered yet by the time the episode ends. So will Kirk or Cruz get to Eden first about what they did earlier in the day? That was the day of their party, so wouldn't Cruz and Eden have been together a lot that day? I'm not sure. Cruz might be able to remember where Eden was, actually. But then with her and, I want to call him Jack, her and Kirk, constantly zipping off for meetings for the company, maybe Cruz really doesn't have any sense of where Eden
I
is at a
imagine
given time.
Kirk actually has a much better sense of Eden's calendar.
Mm-hmm. That's it for this episode. This week's shirt is one that my sister gave me on my 40th birthday. I'm not a doctor, but I am a Doctor Who fan. And as it's the last week of November, we've just passed the November 23rd anniversary of Doctor Who in 1985. I'm wearing my Doctor Who shirt this week. It's not an officially licensed product, so this is a one of a kind. All right, we will see you tomorrow after we've watched episode 339. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Do you always threaten people to have breakfast with you?
I just don't want to eat alone, that's all.
Well, I saw Cruz when I came in. Why don't you break some bread with him?
No, I don't think bread is what we should be breaking together. Anyway, he's probably much too busy investigating one thing or another.
This may not still be too late. I'm going to make a couple of calls.
That's a good idea. Pull some strings, but try not to get all tangled up in them.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 339 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Tuesday, November 26th, 1985. And just before we did our recording, we watched a Barnaby Jones, the last one of the 70s, December 27th, 1979. And I thought, will we see any Santa Barbara people in this? Always a good chance of seeing Charles Bateman, and they had like 4 guest stars, and none of them were anyone I even had heard of. And then special guest star A. Martinez. And he had a really big role in this too. He was the main character, so that was really good to see.
And quite a different role from Cruz Castillo. And there he is.
That guy, and he had quite long hair in this. All right, Cruz is in this episode, and he can't get through to Eden on his car phone. He's shown driving and trying to get through to her. The phone is busy because Kirk Cranston has made it first. He's on the payphone. He's called Eden. He says, Cruz is on his way to talk to you, and we got to get the story straight about why my footprints are outside the window. And she says, no, I don't want to tell any more lies. So this prompts Kirk to quickly drive to the Capwells. Now, Cruz has a head start on him, but Kirk manages to get there first and burst in and tell Eden the whole story that he had told Cruz about a hose running that she had asked Kirk to turn off for her. And then Cruz comes running in and says, wow, it's a good thing I'm not a traffic cop, because you sure were speeding when you passed me. So Cruz asks her if, she and Kirk were on the property earlier the day of the attempt on Cece's life, and she says she doesn't think so. And then Kirk starts to panic, and then Eden kind of plays it up a bit and goes, oh, that's right, we were walking on the grounds earlier in the day, and there was a garden hose running, and I couldn't find Reuben, so I asked Kirk to turn it off for me. So the look on Cruz's face, that he obviously doesn't believe her at all.
Yeah.
So he leaves in disgust. Then Cruz talks to Mary, because now he's starting to think of Mason, as a possibility, and gets her to tell the whole story again and just really go over, how long did he leave you in the study while he went to get the bottle of wine? And she says, oh, he did call me from the atrium. And then Cruz points out there's no way to know where he was actually calling from. So, it seems like Mason is still a viable suspect after that discussion. We then see Cruz... Pearl wonders why Cruz is still looking at suspects when they both know that Eden did it. So that is a good point. Mason later finds Cruz inspecting the window in Cece's room. It's now kind of stuck. Cruz thinks it's because of the rain. And Cruz brings up to Mason that 10 minutes that he was unaccounted for when he went to get the wine. A lot of stuff happening in the Capwell atrium in this episode. A lot of people coming from one side or the other as their scenes start, because other people have been in the atrium for the previous scenes, and some close-ups, so you can't tell that there might be other people further away. But Mason tells Eden that Kirk really botched that land acquisition that they were trying to bid on. And as they talk it through, Eden suspects that maybe Mason saw the courier, signed for the courier letter that came saying that the auction had been moved up, and maybe he was hiding that document from Kirk. So anyway, Kirk apologizes. Mason thinks Eden should fire Kirk, and Eden, she's a little annoyed at first, but then she says, "Oh well, these mistakes happen." Later, Mason suggests to Kirk that maybe Eden should be paying him out of her own money rather than Capwell Enterprises money. Eden says, "Oh, it might not be too late to buy that land," and she goes to make a call. Mason calls after her. "Well, pull some strings, but try not to get tangled up in them." Sophia talks to Eden about her breaking up with Cruz, and then also about, Eden forgiving her. It doesn't really go well. Eden says, "Well, I already forgave you once." So the next time we see Sophia, she is writing a goodbye letter to Kelly and Ted and Eden. And she tells them she's moving back to Rome. What are your thoughts? Is that the last we've seen of Sophia? We'll see of Sophia?
No, I don't think it will be. I think perhaps Ted and Kelly will implore her to stay, even if Eden's not really on board. So I think there's that possibility. Plus, I wonder if she would leave if Cece became resuscitated, That would probably change things a lot. Or if Eden is in danger, she may, even though she and Eden aren't getting along, she may want to stay and, even offer herself as a witness to the fact that Eden didn't do it, even if she had to perjure herself. I think she would be willing to do that. So I think there's a lot of reasons she could stay.
Well, one thought I had is that maybe the actress is getting her vacation time, just like Charles Bateman has.
Yes.
And that she'll go to Rome for a couple of weeks, and then maybe Ted or Kelly will go there, to bring her back or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good possibility, too.
But then again, I thought that Gina was maybe taking a vacation, but she's back from Paris after only a day. Everyone's a little surprised. She wears about 10 different outfits in this episode that she's bought in Paris. They all look really good. She walks in just as Eden is downstairs, and she says, "Oh, can you ask Rosa to bring my bags upstairs?" And Eden says, "Well, Rosa's got the flu and she's in bed." And then Gina tries to get Eden to carry all her packages and luggage up the stairs. And Eden does not opt for that choice. No. And so Gina does the only obvious thing. She says, "I'll get Reuben to move them up later." So he's the gardener, but I guess Gina's running the house and is paying his bills. Yeah. So I guess she expects him to maybe do that. So Reuben is still around. It's interesting.
We just don't see him ever.
Keep tabs on Reuben, as we'll never see him again. No one's talked about Philip for a while, though, so I don't know if he's still employed there. Then Eden says, "Aren't you worried about your husband?" And Gina says, "Oh yes, it was on the tip of my tongue. Any more attempts?" Eden says, "Travel normally broadens people. Or are you already as broad as you can get?" Mason finally realizes he cannot really stretch things out any longer, and as Gina is making plans for them again, Mason just has to break it to her that he's in love with Mary and Gina. So felt so sorry for Gina. Linda Gibney is just so great as Gina. I just feel sorry for her.
Yeah, I really like the way she acts like this. And I think she knows she's doing this. She acts like this kind of frivolous housewife, and she's always kind of twittering around like about her clothes or whatever. But she's actually doing all this scheming and everything, and I'm sure she's not going to let Mason just wander off with Mary. I'm sure there's
I think she still has one ace to play in that Mary doesn't know that he was having an affair with Gina, and that might, throw her off a little to think that Mason slept with his father's wife, right? So that could be. That's the only card I can think of, other than pulling out the documents again,
which we did hear referred to today.
So so it's just two aces.
Yeah.
It takes Mother Isabel to figure out that Mason is jealous of Mark. And when she explains it to Mary, it all suddenly comes clear to Mary. She runs back to the Capitol House, tells Mason, Mark and I are just friends, and I was comforting him. And Mason says, well, I walked by just when that was happening. And she said, I thought that might have been the case. And anyway, they are once again a happy couple. So, depending on how long Gina takes to come up with a scheme to break them up, they might be happy for a few days.
Yeah, it's possible. She will certainly have much more on her plate than just Mason and Mary, or I assume when Cece wakes up.
That's not all that happened in this episode. We also spent some time at Buzz's, where Nick and Dylan argue about the recent events. Pearl comes over at one point to tell them that they're ruining the ambience of his restaurant. Nick is angry, among other things, that Carlo is leaving the country without paying for any of his crimes. But at one point Dylan says, are you sure you're not angry that Kelly and I were alone together in Ghost Town? It's kind of funny that he calls it Ghost Town as if that's the name of the town. I wonder if the actor, thought that was the name of the town, missed an A, and maybe that was he never saw it written anywhere else and just thought it was a typo or something, or just misremembered it. But I think when they were in the Ghost Town, he called it Ghost Town once too. So anyway, it's kind of funny that it's now a capitalized city called Ghost Town.
I thought that both Nick and Dylan had perhaps received a slight wardrobe uplift or something, because Nick is wearing this very bright yellow, black polka dotted shirt, very different style than we've ever seen him in before. And Dylan, it seemed to me, was sporting a new perm. So,
I didn't even notice that.
So,
I was too busy typing.
It just seemed to me like they had gotten a little bit of a change in their look. Very, very slight.
Well, they probably had to stay. I mean, I imagine the Ghost Town stuff was shot possibly, days, possibly weeks apart from the studio stuff. So they probably had to keep very stable in their look during that whole time. And so now, once that was all wrapped, they could tweak them a bit. Kirk is not done with Eden today. He tells her he wants to marry her, and then later he gives her a ring and says, "You just keep that until you're ready to put it on. Then I'll know you want to marry me too."
And that, if she does put it on, I think is going to drive Cruz right over the edge.
I can see Eden, because when we first met Eden, she was so impulsive and just what's the word? She would purposely do the opposite of what people wanted her to do. I can't think of the word for that. And I can imagine that after just a little fight with Cruz, she might just put it on out of bloody mindedness. So.
Yeah, she's quite contrary in some ways. Yeah.
So she's got Chekhov's ring in her pocket.
Yes. But I also felt like in this episode, just thinking about Cruz kind of being pushed closer and closer to his limits, I felt that there were several characters, all very different characters with very different agendas, who are all getting, I think, a little exasperated with Cruz. And I mean, we've certainly seen the back and forth between him and Pearl about this case. But Kirk is just about had it with him. Mason has was sparring with him. I mean, Mason always spars, but Mason was getting exasperated. We could see that Mary herself, during her questioning, was not liking where Cruz was taking things either. So that was
He is working
interesting.
his way down his list. It just occurred to me Sophia's next on the list. So it may actually be Cruz who forbids her from leaving town.
Yes, that's possible.
Yeah. We'll see when we watch episode 340 of Santa Barbara. And then Thursday we'll have a break because of Thanksgiving. So we'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Aren't you even going to ask about your husband?
I don't suppose there were any more attempts on his life?
Travel usually broadens people. Or are you already as broad as you can get?
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 340 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Wednesday, November 27th, 1985. Sophia tells Lionel she's going back to Rome. Gina asks Lionel to drive Brandon to camp, and Sophia volunteers because it's on her way. Sophia tells Cruz she's leaving and tells him that Eden needs him. Sophia tells Eden she's leaving, and Eden doesn't care. Sophia goes to say goodbye to Cece, and that's when Gina finds out that Sophia's going back to Rome. After overhearing Kirk tell Eden he's going to spank her, Sophia tells Kirk she will keep an eye on him from Rome. Yes, there was a weird conversation between Eden and Kirk where he ends up saying, I'm going to spank you and carry you out of here. Gina spies on Mason and Mary kissing. Actually, we should talk about the fact that Cruz didn't tell her not to leave town, even though she's on the suspect list.
We were really expecting that.
Yeah.
Cruz is not on top of his game right now.
Mm-hmm. So she may well be gone forever. Don't look at IMDb. Gina spies on Mason and Mary kissing and comes up with a plan. Another lovely Gina plan that I didn't remember until the last second. So that was a nice surprise for me. She tells Mason she wants to burn his father's will with him. And we see her getting it from its hiding place behind a picture in her room. And I was thinking that her plan was going to be that like Eden would walk in before they could burn it and grab the will, and then Mason would be out, and he couldn't blame her.
You were thinking a bit bigger, I think.
Well, that may still happen tomorrow.
Sure.
This actually may be a double whammy, because the actual part of the plan that we saw happening this time is Gina secretly orders some flowers, some roses, it looks like, from the closing credits, and writes a note to Mary from Mason. She waits for Mason to go into his shower to prepare for his date with Mary, and then tells Mary, oh, look, these flowers just arrived. I think they're for you. And Mary sees the note that says, come to my room in 5 minutes. Gina sneaks across, only in a towel at this point, and calls to Mason to come out, and or actually says, oh, I'd like to join you. He says, I don't think Mary would like that. He goes, well, let's have a goodbye kiss. And he doesn't agree to that either. But as he comes out of the bathroom, she drops her towel. And Mason says, Gina, just as Mary reaches for the doorknob. So will Mary catch Mason fresh out of the shower in the room with a naked Gina?
Well, I think it could go two ways, basically. Either she does or she doesn't. So, she opens the door and there they are. But we have seen this kind of thing before where it looks like it's going in one direction and it doesn't. So, for example, when Gina set up that entire elaborate thing to get Eden to come to Cece's bedside and had the actors tape their voices and everything, and then just at the crucial moment, Eden dropped her earring and wasn't on the phone anymore. So it could be that just as she's reaching for the doorknob, Mary gets an interruption from someone else in the house and has to run off and check CC or something like that.
He's right across the hall. I didn't know Mason's room was across there. I thought that was more or less where Channing's room was, but that could be another bend around the hallway. But yeah, they could torture us actually by having Mason and Gina in that scene throughout the whole episode, and Mary keeps, leaving for various reasons,
Yeah.
coming back to the Mason. Are you ready for me? Stay out. Oh, I have to go check on your dad. And Gina somehow manages to be naked the whole episode,
Yeah.
keep Mason from getting dressed, and by the end of the episode, they could still end up with Mary at the door
Yeah.
if they wanted to torture us, like Days of Our Lives sometimes does. So this will be fun, but probably the start of Mason's downfall. I think maybe the will thing will be, after she's gotten Mary mad at him, she'll work on the will, and then Mary will run to Mark's arms and marry him.
And Cruz will charge him with attempted murder.
Oh, that's right. I wonder if Gina could push that towards Mason. Interesting. She might be able to say something to Cruz that's not entirely true.
Now, you say this could be the start of Mason's downfall. I mean, really, Mason's been in a sort of free fall ever since he got into the fight with his dad in the early weeks of the series. So he hasn't really gone up a lot. He's gone up a bit more lately, but...
With Cece in a coma, it looks like Mason's drinking has at least reduced, at least that we can see. We've seen him have a drink once or twice, but he hasn't been guzzling it since Cece was there to thwart everything he tried. Nick mentions to Dylan that Janice's original reason for doing the photo shoot was to fund his gold expedition, so he's wondering why Dylan's still in favor of her going through with it. Kelly is uncomfortable watching Dylan and Janice kiss, and we see a lot of just shots of Kelly's uncomfortable, possibly jealous face throughout the episode. She snaps at him later when they're decorating a tree with apples near the gazebo for the photo shoot, for the Garden of Eden style photo shoot. Janice arrives in her leaf bikini holding a snake, who ends up not being used in the shoot. And at some point, Dylan and Kelly and Warren, I forgot to say Warren is helping.
Yeah, Warren's there.
They all decide that it should be a closed set, and it's just going to be Nick and Janice. So that leaves Kelly free to have several other conversations with people throughout the episode. Kelly introduces Eden to Dylan at Buzz's, so they jet off there. Kelly also has a conversation with someone in the atrium, with Eden earlier in the atrium, I think, saying, "I'm the big sister now," but doesn't seem to help her that much. Eden is introduced to Dylan, and Kelly says to her that the two brothers are complete opposites. Kelly asks Nick why he sounds so jealous of her and Dylan. She says, "At least the person I spent time with had clothes on." This is after the photo shoot, of course. So Kelly was zipping around, doing a lot of stuff today.
It's kind of nice in a way to see her interacting with a lot of other characters, because a lot of her scenes tend to be with one character.
For weeks on end.
Yeah.
Like that time on Days of Our Lives when Brady and Nicole were in a room in the Kyriakis mansion for about 3 months straight, just having similar conversations over and over again. So my theory that we would hear the song Centerfold during the photo shoot did not come true. But perhaps when the magazine comes out and Dylan leafs through it, we will have another chance to hear it. Warren's sticking around, so maybe there's something with Warren and Janice, although she gave Dylan a pretty good kiss at Buzz's. So not sure what's going on there. Potential jumble of relationships there. Eden has a dream of Kirk's engagement ring. They do a lot of dream sequences on Santa Barbara. Reminds me a lot of Dark Shadows, weird dream things.
Yeah, they've actually done that a lot since the beginning. I think one of the first week or two we saw that sort of fantasy Mason was having about Santana. So they do it a lot. A lot of them are very, you can tell, a little bit inspired by music videos. They've got that same kind of photography and effects and that kind of thing.
As I was doing the extras for last week's podcast, one of the Brandons yeah, I was going through looking for snapshots of Brandon, and there's one I'd totally forgotten because it was such a short thing of Santana dreaming of Brandon running away from her in a dark void. That didn't really, it wasn't really part of a greater thing, just her ongoing fear of losing Brandon. So, it's a lot to set up an extra thing like that. It's kind of fun. I do, thinking about it now, I think will do that a lot throughout the series.
Yeah.
She wonders if she could make a life with Kirk. So she's contemplating it. DA Tony Patterson tells Cruz to get a deposition from Eden. Kelly tells Cruz to fight for Eden. Of course, Sophia's already told him much the same thing. So Cruz hears Kelly and Sophia's voice in his head, giving him those directions to fight for Eden. And he says, I'm going to do it. And next thing you know, he's at the Capwell house. And he says to Eden, will you marry me? So she has 2 proposals on the table.
Yeah, she's got 2 suitors. One who wants to spank her, and one who might send her to prison for attempted murder.
Yep, she's got a fun time ahead. We'll see who she chooses. Will we have another November wedding? It's already the end of November, but next time we can have a wedding is February.
February wedding.
Mm-hmm. Might have to get that.
So this
champagne
tussle will
after.
probably be going on for the next 3 months.
Yep, and maybe at some point Cece will wake up. Maybe not. We're seeing the new actor, the coma-only actor, Jarston Witness. We had a very good close-up of his face this time. It's the first time we've had a close-up of him as he's playing Cece. So we could tell it was not Charles Bateman.
Yeah.
He seems to have some sun damage to his skin on the right side. So that's something Charles Bateman doesn't have. So considering the rest of his face is covered with a mask and a hat, that's all we have to try and match him to other things. We had the cast credits and the crew credits today. A nice long theme. We heard a bit of the theme song that we don't normally hear towards the end, but they were running pretty fast. So there is a longer version of the theme song, I think, than the one we saw. All the main cast are the same. No one's changed their last name or first name. Janice and the DA and Brandon are in the secondary credits. Of course, we've seen all of them many times before. And no longer in the credits, of course, are Carlo and his men. So, pretty steady. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving in the U.S., November 28th, Thursday. We just had our Thanksgiving dinner last night, a week late, because I had unexpected dental issues just before the long weekend. So we thought we'd defer our turkey. And then you had chicken cordon bleu in the end. But I had turkey. So, good time for Thanksgiving, and I will probably work on a bonus. Probably just attach it to the episode rather than a separate bonus of C.C. Capwell's annual Thanksgiving wish to his employees. So I'm already thinking of some fun things for him to say. So we're skipping Thursday, and we'll be back after we watch Friday, November 29th, episode number 341. We'll see you in a few minutes. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Give me that. All right, you listen to me up there, whoever you are. Now, this is C.C. Capwell speaking, and I'm ordering you
to have a happy Thanksgiving. This is my Thanksgiving message to all Capwell employees and their families and customers of Capwell Industries and Hotels. You all have so much to be thankful for. Unless, of course, I pulled a gun on you because I found out you had fathered my oldest child. Or you've been impregnated without your consent by the princess of a European island nation and then subsequently had your baby stolen with the help of the evil twin cousin of the chief Capwell attorney in order to take over the throne of the aforementioned oil-rich nation. Or were raped, strangled, shot, and or murdered by Peter Flint, the head of the Capwell Hotel Division, the former fiancé of my daughter Kelly. Or had your jewels stolen while staying at the Capwell Hotel by the yet-to-be-apprehended so-called Robin Hood thief, or been spied on in the Capwell presidential suite via a secret two-way mirror that I found out about but
failed to have removed, or boarded an elevator in the Capwell Hotel that had been rigged as a death trap to kill me by my second wife's stepson, Marcello Armonti, or nearly died in the subsequent fire that engulfed the hotel, or gotten trapped and nearly killed in the tunnel that exploded beneath the Capwell mansion due to nitroglycerin planted once again by Marcello, or being paralyzed and left catatonic due to a negligent explosion at a Capwell oil rig, or won a $10 million settlement to pay for your paralyzed and catatonic husband, only to have the check canceled at the last minute by myself, or been framed for the murder of my son by my second wife, or been attacked with a bullwhip by the president of Capwell Enterprises, myself, C.C. Capwell, or been hypnotized by my wife's stepson, Marcello, or had your career and future livelihood threatened by a Capwell attorney by exposing your secret affair with and subsequent blackmail of my son Channing, or gotten married to a Capwell, not realizing that he only wanted control over your adopted son, or had your memory erased by the evil twin of Capwell attorney Jack Stanfield Lee, or died after falling through the glass ceiling of the newly opened Orient Express restaurant. Tuesday nights, tacos are half price, or were committed to a sanitarium against your will by a Capwell, or were falsely accused of rape by one of our Orient Express waitresses, or were shot dead by one of our Orient Express waitresses, or if my third wife framed you for pulling the plug on me when I was in a coma. But to everyone else, happy Thanksgiving 1985!
Take it easy, Mr. Stewart.
You can't even leave the country without causing a national disaster.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We have finished episode 341 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Friday, November 29th, 1985. So it's the last air day of November. But are the sweeps over? I'm never quite sure if the sweeps go a few days into the next month or not. But we will see what happens in the Friday episode. Mary comes in just as Gina is kissing Mason. Now they redid this, reenacted it, and this time Gina doesn't drop her towel. So that's kind of an interesting reenactment. Gina tells Mary, just to rub it in, "You just feasted your eyes on something that's been going on for months." With such glee. Oh, Linda Gibney, so good. Mason nearly strangles Gina. And he tells her that he will have his revenge on her. And she actually looks frightened after that.
Yeah, she looks pretty shaken.
She says, "You can burn your will now. I have the original still." Mason tries to explain to Mary that it's been over for months. Mary runs out of the house and goes to Eden, who's at Kirk's. She mentions that Gina said that everyone knew. And she said, "Well, Ted and Kelly and I just didn't know how to really bring up the subject with you."
Yeah.
But Eden does say that Mason cared for her a lot. Mm-hmm. So this is, I think, a positive, endorsement, considering how much Eden hates Mason.
Yeah, it is. Well, I get the feeling they all like Mary. Except Gina obviously was threatened by her. And, they, whatever their quarrels are with each other, they don't want to see Mary hurt. That would be how I would interpret that.
Mason shows up at the clinic, but Mark's there, so he leaves again. And then Mark tells Mary, "Oh, Mason was here." And at some point, Mason and Mary end up in the same room again. And he explains that when it happened, his father had just disowned him, and that Cece had never loved Gina. So Mary forgives him in an impersonal sort of way, she says. Mm-hmm. So she generically forgives him, but obviously they are still broken up.
I'm thinking about the resetting of that opening scene. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if part of the reason why they opted at the end not to have Gina drop her towel is it just makes the path to forgiveness a little more believable with Mary.
Maybe. Augusta brings Lionel a celebratory pie with sparklers in it. I believe from Augusta's standpoint, this is to celebrate Sophia is leaving town and moving to Rome.
Probably, yeah.
She's wearing an apron that says Miss Banana Cream Pie. I don't know if we've seen that before or what that's a reference to, or if that's something that Augusta, an award that Augusta won when she was a teen or something. I don't know. Sophia and Brandon drive to Camp Pioneer, as we all expected, but they didn't realize that there's a giant forest fire approaching the camp. Brandon was playing with the transistor radio earlier. He actually heard the news, but tuned it out because it was news, and Sophia kept telling him to turn off the radio, so she missed the warning as well. The camp staff are staying up until the last minute to turn people away and to phone people who've maybe are still on their way, and they end up calling Rosa. They have to bug out at 5-minute warning before the fire is going to approach, so they leave a note for whoever might still be coming. They're aware that Brandon is probably on his way. They leave a note saying, "Fire, get out immediately." So when Brandon and Sophia arrive, Brandon finds that note pretty quickly, and Sophia quickly checks the map to see if there's another route they can take out of there. But meanwhile, Rosa has told Lionel that there's a fire up there. Well, they've all seen it on the news anyway. And so he immediately jumps in his car and drives up to rescue them. Warren also is planning to go up there to cover it for the paper. Santana wants a ride with him, but he says no. But she shows up at the newspaper office while he's trying to make arrangements for a helicopter. And I think she may well have talked him into taking her.
So we actually do see a bit more of Santana this episode than we have for a little while.
And every time we see a new pair of people together that haven't been together before, you think, oh, is that a potential couple?
Yeah.
Santana and Warren?
Yeah, maybe.
If Janice doesn't work out, or she and Dylan end up riding into the sunset together soon. Remember Cruz asked Eden to marry him. They're standing outside on the front doorstep of the Capwells for most of this first part of the episode. Interestingly, one of their scenes continues right after the scene where Mary ran out of the house. So I think normally they don't normally make this kind of mistake. But there were these two scenes, although they were occurring in the exact same place right in front of the door. The characters never intersected, so maybe there was something re-edited at some point, maybe as part of the rejigging of the Friday to be a cliffhanger episode, and I guess they thought this was the lesser of two evils, because really we see Mary running out from inside the house, and then we immediately cut to Cruz and Eden still talking in front of the door. Theoretically, Mary could have just run by them, and they just ignored her and kept talking.
Yeah.
So she ends up putting the ring in her pocket, and she says she doesn't really say anything, and she leaves and goes back to Kirk's. She asks Kirk if she can stay at his place, and of course, yes, of course, he says. She puts the ring down on the coffee table while she goes to have a shower. So when Kirk comes home from a meeting, he finds the ring, knows she's been with Cruz, and has left her a gift on the bed, which is a pink robe. You'd think he would shy away from pink, because it would remind her of the dress that she thinks she tried to kill Cece in.
Point.
But she seems to be happy with the gift, and he asks about her visit with Cruz, and he has a nice long speech that he uses to try and turn Eden's head towards him. He says that if Cruz knows that she did it, then that means he's covering for her.
Yeah.
And then he concludes this discussion of their relationship by saying that she and Cruz have a corrosive kind of love that wears people out after a couple of years, like Jack Lee and my mother, or your parents. This is an interesting tactic to take, because he's not denying the fact that they have these strong feelings for each other. He's just saying this is going to burn out in a couple of years, and you might as well bail now.
Yeah.
So I thought that was actually pretty clever of Kirk. Cruz knocks on the door, and he's actually kind of tentative about it. He approaches and leaves and comes back. Finally knocks, calls for Eden, but she doesn't answer. Then he starts walking away again and comes back. But meanwhile, Kirk says to her, "I'm not naive enough to think that a piece of paper will change everything. But having you there next to me, that is going to change everything. Eden, will you marry me?" And Eden says, yes. Will we be able to get another wedding in under the wire before the sweeps end?
Maybe. Or maybe it'll be the next sweeps and we'll have lots of drama in between.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean you're marrying Kirk Cranston? So you're thinking February?
Maybe, yeah.
And then Kelly and Nick February? Mm-hmm. So double February.
Because then we got drama with, Nick and Kelly and Dylan as well. So we've got two little triangles going on leading up to February weddings.
Maybe a Gina and Mason wedding, if things go strange. But
we'll probably still have that triangle.
Cece dies. I mean, why not try to marry Mason? I can see Gina being trying for that and seeing what blackmail papers she might have that might lead her to that. And Sophia has failed to leave town. Augusta was a bit disappointed when she heard that not only was Sophia not on the plane, but that Lionel is driving there for her. Augusta says she can't even leave the country without causing a national disaster. So that is it for a Friday episode of a shortened week due to Thanksgiving.
Now, one thing I think I commented on as we were watching this episode, of course, living in a part of the world that does have a lot of forest fires during the summer, especially where your parents live. You know when there is a fire in the area. It's pretty obvious. Mm-hmm. So I don't think in real life they would really be taken by surprise by it.
Well, there was the one line that the guy who was, on the radio with the camp said, well, you can't see the smoke now, but in about 5 minutes the wind's going to turn. So I think maybe that was their covering line to cover why Sophia Brandon might not be aware of it and drive straight into the camp.
Yeah, we drove for, 5 hours to visit your dad, and we drove through
a lot of smoke
and flames and
you
ash.
You can certainly smell it even when you can't see it.
Dark, dark skies, and even if you're sealed off in your car, you can still smell it. So I do think, even if they could not see the fire, they would be able to smell it at the very least.
Well, at least when Sophia was driving back, she had the radio on, and there was lots of guidance about which roads were closed, and Lionel was listening to that same radio broadcast, and they said, no, people are allowed in the area, and he was like, ha-ha, I'm going in anyway. I, therefore, am going anyway.
Which firefighters love.
Yeah,
that
they
attitude.
Just love it when people don't follow orders.
And we didn't know this sort of thing in 1985, to be fair. There weren't
we'd heard of the occasional wildfires in California, but it really has accelerated in the last 15 years or so, all up and down the coast, I think.
Yeah.
Hey, we're in a rainforest. How come we're having so much stuff on fire? That's it for week 70. We'll be back next week, or in 2 weeks, for week 71. And as we approach Christmas, we'll be accelerating. We might be releasing weekly so that we can sync up Christmas 1985 with Christmas 2021 and New Year's 2021 with New Year's 86. And then we'll go back to the every 2 week schedule. But I'll be a slave driver and we'll have to watch Santa Barbara every day to get all those in on time. All right. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Have you two set a wedding date yet?
No, we haven't. And when we do, you'll be the last to know, believe me.
Oh, that's Mozart? He's pretty good, isn't he?